Hello, welcome to Homeschool Life. My name is Bobby, and in this video, we are going to be discussing accounting adjustments that are manually created by an admin. To do this, of course, you will need to be logged into your admin website. And from the home page, you will need to access the accounting tool, either by clicking here or here. Now, before we get too far into this, I want to mention one important thing, and that is that the way that manual adjustments are created depends on whether the invoices in question are for full payment or partial payment accounting categories. If you don't have a thorough understanding of the difference between full payment and partial payment accounting categories, I would recommend that you watch the accounting introduction video because that is discussed in great detail. We're going to start with full payment accounting categories. These would include categories such as registration and renewals, sign-ups, CRRP for class registrations, and the category called Other, as well as any custom created full payment accounting categories that your group uses. There's a couple of things I want to review before we get started with full payment accounting adjustments. First of all, adjustments that are created in full payment categories are done to close unpaid invoices. Refunds and payment reversals are the exception. However, we are not going to cover those in this video. They are covered in a different video called Manual Refunds and Payment Reversals. Because these adjustments that we're going to be looking at are in full payment accounting categories, adjustment amounts must match the invoice amounts exactly. That's why they're called full payment categories. No partial adjustments can be made in this case. We do have a few workarounds, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the video later. There are several default adjustment types that are already set up, but as I mentioned, you can create customized adjustment types as well, and that is set up in your accounting settings. And here are the adjustment categories, and you'll notice that there are several in the gray area. These here. These are all defaults that are available with the system, and in the case of this group, they have added 2 additional adjustment categories, one for a teacher exemption and one for child of the teacher. We'll get into that a little bit later because we will be using both of those adjustment categories as we apply some adjustments. Okay, so now let's return to our accounts receivable listing. And the first thing that we're going to look at is how to create an adjustment in a full payment accounting category. To do that, we need to access a member account where we know an adjustment needs to be made, and we need to find an invoice that we are going to close with that adjustment. So let's look at the Brenner account. I do know that there is a cleaning fee invoice that we can close with an adjustment. Let's take a look at their invoice and payment detail, and we can see here that there is an open invoice for the second semester cleaning fee. A lot of groups will give certain perks and discounts to their teachers. So in this case, this group chooses not to charge this cleaning fee to their instructors. So what we would need to do if we want to apply a credit to this account, because this is a teacher who does not have to pay the cleaning fee, is we would go to the Add Adjustment option. The next thing that we need to do is to locate the invoice that we are closing with this adjustment. And it is this one here. So I would check this box. I can leave the date the same, or I could change it if I want to. I need to key in some kind of a description. And here I would say maybe teacher exempt from cleaning fee. I would select the type. And in this case, I'm going to say that it is a teacher exemption. The amount is $5. Now notice I cannot change that amount. I'm trying to highlight it and backspace over it. You cannot change the amount because the amount is determined by which invoices you select in this area here. Again, this is a full payment accounting category, so the adjustment amount has to equal the exact amount of the invoice. So this is calculated by the system because I checked $5 here. It's going to calculate and put $5 here. You can either email the family or not. In this case, I'm not going to. And when I'm finished, I just say Save Adjustment, and that is now saved. Now, if we go back to the members invoice and payment detail listing, we will see that a few things have happened. First of all, we will see that the invoice that we closed has ADJ in the payment status. It is no longer open for payment. And if we scroll down to the adjustments section for this member account, we will see the adjustment that we just created is located here. There's our description, teacher exempt from cleaning fee. There's the type that we used. Now notice here too, there is an invoice icon in the invoices column here. This indicates to us which invoice or invoices we closed with this adjustment. By clicking on that invoice icon, the system will display the exact invoice that we closed. I'm going to go back to that family account again. Now, there is something else you can do to speed this process up a little bit. If you have several adjustments that need to be made and they're very similar, let's go to account called the Lambert account here. And here we have that same second semester cleaning fee that is due for this account. So let's say that we have several teachers that are going to receive the credit for this cleaning fee. So instead of entering them one by one, one after the other, here's what we can do. We can select Add Adjustment. Again, we're going to select the invoice that is correct. Make sure that we have the correct family listed up here. I'm going to put in my description of teacher exempt from cleaning fee. Select the type, teacher exemption. Notice that $5 is calculated again because I chose a $5 invoice. And then I'm going to, instead of saying Save Adjustment this time, I'm going to click on Save and Add to Batch Input. When I do that, you'll notice that over here on the right side of the screen, there is a box that displays that adjustment that I just did. But notice over here now that my fields are all filled in. Teacher exempt from cleaning fee, teacher exemption. And all I have to do now is select my next member, and I will select the family called Jacobs. And I will locate the same invoice. I simply click on that. Notice now that my date's filled in, my description's filled in, the type is already selected, the amount is there. All I have to do is save and add to batch input if I'm going to do another one. And then I would need to select another family that would require the adjustment. And this family here needs the adjustment, so I can click on cleaning fee. Date is already there, description is there, type is there, amount is there. And now I'm going to be finished, so I'm just going to save this one because this is my last one. Now I could also save it and add to the batch input. Then I can calculate or look over here and see if I have taken care of all of the teachers that I wanted to include in this batch. Once I have, I can just clear the batch and I can return to my adjustments, or I can return back to one of the families in question. But since we've returned to the adjustments section, you can now see a list of each one of those adjustments that we just created. You could also access any one of these member accounts. For example, if we go to the Larson account, we can see that there's the adjustment noted here on the invoice record. And if we scroll down to the adjustment section, here is the adjustment that we just created using the batch input function. Turning to the accounts receivable listing, let's now take a look at the workarounds you can use if you really do need to apply a partial discount or a credit toward a full payment invoice. And again, this needs to be done to an unpaid invoice. Remember, in full payment categories, the system is designed to require full payment. So you want to use these workarounds sparingly. They need to be the exception rather than the rule because there are a few steps involved. So the first thing that we're going to do is really quite simple, but it doesn't document the credit quite as well. So let's take a look at that. And this process involves simply updating the unpaid invoice and having the total amount due reflect the credit. So let's take a look at this Carrie Brown account here. And we'll go to their invoice and payment details so that we can see the invoice that we're going to be looking at. So this is the invoice here. It's a $40 unpaid membership invoice. And if this group gives a $10 credit to, say, teachers, they would need for this teacher to pay $30 instead of $40. So one thing that we can do is simply change the amount on the invoice. We click on the invoice number to do that. We scroll down to the amount, highlight it, backspace over it, and change it. And then I generally like to change something in the description as well so that it does reflect that the credit has been applied. And once we're done with that, we can update the invoice. And when we return, we can see here that the amount due on the invoice is now $30. The invoice description indicates that a $10 credit has been applied because this is a teacher. So that's one very simple way to apply a credit to an unpaid invoice in a partial amount. The other way is a little bit more complex, but it does provide you with an updated invoice record, but also provides you with a documentation in the adjustment section. So let's look at the account for the Reed family, and we'll do a similar thing to this account, but I think you'll see the difference in what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do here is I want to apply a $10 credit. And so in full payment accounting categories, because I have to apply credits in the exact amounts of invoices, what I need is a $10 invoice to apply a $10 credit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this $40 invoice into one for 30 and a second for 10. And again, I can edit it because it's unpaid. So I select the invoice in question here by highlighting and by selecting it. And I'm going to change this invoice to $30. I'm going to make a note that this is invoice 1 of 2 because I'm going to create a second one for the $10. What I'm doing now is I'm highlighting and copying my description so that when I go to create my second invoice, all I have to do is paste in the description. This is very helpful, especially if it's a lengthy description. I'm going to make a mental note that it's the general category and that it is dated 3/15 and that the due date is 4/15. When I'm finished, I update that invoice. You can see here that it's now updated. Now I want to add another invoice. It's the general category, registration and renewals, general accounting category. The date is 3/15. The due date was 4/15. And the description I'm going to just paste in, and instead of being invoice 1 of 2, this is going to be invoice 2 of 2, and then I am going to put in the amount of $10. Now remember, the original invoice was 40, so now what we've done after I save this invoice is we have split it into 2 invoices, one for 30 and one for 10. Now I can apply an adjustment to the $10 invoice. Select the $10 invoice. The description might be discount for the teacher. The type might be a teacher exemption, or you could even use a discount, or you could use a credit, whichever of the types means the most to you and would make the most sense to your member. And when you're finished, you can save it. And now what we have is the $10 record, invoice record that now has ADJ in the paid status. We have the open $30 credit or invoice that we created. And we also now have an adjustment record in the adjustment section that shows a $10 teacher exemption with the invoice icon here that we can click on if we'd like to see the invoice that we applied this to. So that's a little bit better in terms of documentation, because now you actually see that the adjustment record was created, whereas just changing the invoice amount will work certainly, but you don't end up having that adjustment record that has the exact same documentation. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to take a look at, turning to the receivables listing, is I'd like to take a look at how to create partial payment adjustments. We're moving completely away from the full payment categories now, and we're moving into the partial payment categories. This would be the category CR for class registration, or any other custom partial payment category that your group has set up. Now, I want you to keep one thing in mind again as we're looking at partial payment accounting categories. The adjustments in these categories do not apply to specific invoices. Rather, they apply to the total balance of all the invoices in that category. So adjustments of any amount may be made, and the adjustment will then reduce the balance in the category. So let's take a look at a specific member account where we can apply a partial payment adjustment. Let's take a look at the Walters account, because I know that Melissa Walters is a teacher. She is teaching driver's ed, which is a partial payment category we've set up for her. You can look at the invoice here that's forcing this partial payment balance. And you'll notice that the name of the student in this class is Amy Walters. So what we have here is we have the teacher, Melissa Walters. Her own daughter is taking her class. So it would be silly to require her to pay for her own daughter to take her class. So what we want to do is we want to apply an adjustment so that the balance of the partial payment category does not reflect her daughter's enrollment in her class. I like to start off by looking at the account so I kind of have an idea what the partial payment balance is. So I look at the invoice and payment details, and a lot of times I go out to the outstanding balances here as well, and I just confirm that here's what we're looking at here. The partial payment category CR for the teacher, Melissa Walters, has a balance of $350. Now notice there's no invoices listed here. That's because, again, payments and credits in partial payment categories do not apply to specific invoices, and all you're going to be shown on those is the total balance in the category. So we want to go ahead and apply a $350 credit in this account. So what we need to do is select Add Adjustment. Now, the thing that's different about partial payment categories versus full payment categories when we get to this point is that you actually key in the amount of the adjustment. And in this case, we're going to key in the amount $350 because we're basically going to completely eliminate the credit or the balance in that class registration category, because this is her own daughter taking her class. Now, you could key in any amount here. If you were just going to give a partial credit here, you could key in $200 here, or $20, or anything that you want to. But we're going to key in the total $350. And then we're going to put in a description. So we'll say that this is a credit and the credit type. We actually created a credit type in this group called Child of the Teacher because this happens fairly often. And once I'm finished with that, I can save the adjustment and I can go back to their statement of account. And now what you'll have is a adjustment record showing the credit of $350. And you'll notice it's in the CR category. And if I go back to the outstanding balances, remember previously there was actually a listing down here of the CR balance for the Walters account. It is no longer there because we have closed out the entire CR balance by applying that credit. Now there's something else that you might want to make note of, and that is if you put in an amount that is more than the balance in the category, what will happen is that you will force an account credit to result. So let's take a look at a member account where this happened. If we look at the Schmidt account, we see here that the account shows a $40 credit. We're on the outstanding balances tab, and if you look at this, it might be confusing because you have two open invoices of $5 a piece, and yet you have a $40 credit overall on the account. Well, that's because there is a $50 credit in the CR accounting category. What happened to cause this $50 credit is that they had several CR invoices. They had 350 and 200 and 200. So that's $750. They then had a payment of $700 toward the total balance. And then they had a $100 credit. They gave a partial credit for a canceled class that must have canceled partway through the year. So what has happened was that there is a $50 credit in that particular category. If you're not sure about that, we can always go in and filter by that CR category and just take a look at what we have. So we have $750 of invoices, a $700 payment that would have left a $50 balance, and then we put in an adjustment or a credit of $100. So that leaves a credit on the account of $50. Now, you're looking at this saying, yeah, but this says $40. Well, that's because, I remove my filters, that's because we have two open invoices of $5 a piece. So your $50 credit and your two $5 invoices leaves you with an overall account credit of $40 here and here. So again, as I mentioned earlier, there is a way that you can apply these or this credit so that these two invoices can be closed. The system will not do this, however. You have to do it manually. So let's take a look at how that's done. We are going to go up to the Add Adjustment. Like we did earlier, I am going to key in an amount here, but what I'm going to key in here is I'm going to key in the amount of the credit that I'm applying, and I'm going to key it as a negative number. I'm going to key in a negative $10, and that's because I am reducing this credit balance by $10 to pay for these two invoices that total $10. Now you'll notice down here in the amount that the amount is zero. That's because there is actually no exchange of funds taking place because I'm using a $10 credit from this credit balance and I'm applying it to these invoices. If there's any amount in this field here, you probably have not entered the numbers correctly up here. So once I have done that, I keyed in my negative here and checked the boxes that are applicable. Then I'm going to key in a description. I'm going to say credit from class cancellation to PE and cleaning fee. You could key anything in there that you want, but that would make sense because I am using the credit from a canceled class and I am paying off the PE dues as well as the cleaning fee. I would select a type here. Most likely I would use the credit, and when I'm finished I can just save that. Now you may be saying, yeah, but the balance is still the same. Well, yes, it is still the same, but now what you've done is you've closed those two invoices. Notice they're no longer displayed here, and now your remaining credit is $40 and it's all in the CR category. So let's look at the invoice and the payment details. Those two invoices that we just closed are indicated here with the ADJ in the paid status. And in the adjustment section, we now have two records for this transaction. Really, we have three, and I'll show you why. So the first one we have is this negative $10. This actually represents the reduction of the credit balance by $10. These two records here show you that you applied the $10 credit. You applied 5 of it here and 5 of it here. The reason that they're separated is because they're in two different accounting categories, so they are separated into two different line items. So that gives you a very good documentation of what happened on that. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind when you're applying these partial payment credits to full payment invoices is that it might affect how your accounting reports will generate. If you have very specific accounting reports that you run for your board monthly or what have you, you just took $10 out of the class registration category and you paid or closed invoices in this category here and this category here. So these are not class registrations. So it might affect how your accounting reports read. As long as you are aware of that, you can easily explain that or document that when the time comes. The other thing that you want to be careful about, and I'm going to show an example of this on the Gordon account, which also has a credit showing. You want to be careful as you apply these partial payment credits to full payment invoices. You want to be careful to keep them within the same teacher account. If your group doesn't use teacher accounts and everything is done through a general account, this doesn't apply to you. But you'll notice in this group, they have a general account and then they have different teacher accounts. Here's an example where Melissa Walters is a teacher. We looked at one of her classes before, and there is a CR credit balance of $275 here, and there is also an open invoice for this family in the Melissa Walters teacher account. You would not want to apply this credit in the CR category to this invoice, which is a different teacher account for Dawn Hansen. Obviously, these teacher accounts need to be, you need to apply your credits within the same teacher account. So in this case, we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to use some of this $275 credit to close this $25 invoice for the teacher account for Melissa Walters. So I'm going to add an adjustment. I am going to key in negative $25 because I am reducing this credit balance by $25, and I'm going to check. I need to make sure I do the right one. It's not this one for Dawn Hansen. It's this one for Melissa Walters. And then I put in my description that I am credit applied from cancellation to IEW. I'm going to select the type, credit. Notice the amount is 0, as we discussed earlier. Because this is a positive and a negative, cancel each other out. And the net is 0. And when I'm finished, I save the adjustment. I can now return back to my outstanding balances. And that invoice that was previously open under this Melissa Walters account is no longer open. And the total balance in that CR category has been reduced from negative $275 to negative $250 because I applied a $25 credit to an open invoice to close it. If you have any questions about this specific topic or others, feel free to visit our admin homepage and create a ticket. Or we also have many helpful videos in our Help Center, and sometimes those videos can answer your questions and you don't need to create a ticket at all. This concludes our video on creating manual adjustments. Thank you for watching.